All right, so onward. So measure every tree ring. In this case, it's every single one from the sample. So in this case, you're going to measure every one of them, okay? And record them somewhere within your lab manual, or not lab manual, but a piece of paper or wherever. So measure every tree ring in the sample to determine whether it was a normal, above normal, meaning a wet, or a below normal, meaning dry year. Okay, so you could maybe even record them here. So say this is however many millimeters. It's going to be wet or dry or normal. Same with this one, or not the same, or whatever it is. Okay, so once you do this, make sure you note N, wet, or normal, wet, or dry on the sample, as you will use this information to answer question 18. Do not measure the most inside and outside rings on the ends of the sample, because the full rings are not displayed. So don't measure this one and don't measure this one, because you don't have an idea of how far it really goes. But do measure this one, 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 so on and so forth. Okay? Okay. Use the lines on the graph to decide whether that year was wet, dry, or normal. By those lines, they mean these ones. So if the millimeter range was between 0 and 6, it's going to be a dry year, sorry. If the millimeter measure was between 6 and about 11, that's going to be a normal year. And if it was above 11, it's going to be a wet year. Okay. So then, how many years from the ones you counted had above normal precipitation, meaning were wet years? How many years were below normal precipitation, meaning dry years? And how many years were normal precipitation? Question 15. A year with below normal precipitation is classified as a drought. Multiple years with below normal precipitation is an extended drought. Extended droughts are very problematic in the western U.S., as they impact water supplies, agriculture, and forest health, and are often associated with wildfires. Look at your pattern of normals, aboves, and belows. So then, what is the longest drought in this sample? Meaning how many years or how many consecutive years with below normal precipitation there were. So just by looking at the sample and how wide they are, just by looking, I have done this, but I'm not looking at my answer key. I can see that there is a set of years that are consecutively small millimeter measurements, meaning they are dry years, over here close to number 1. So that would be a potential place, for example. So you would give me how many years you counted here for question 15. Okay, question 16 is kind of straightforward. I will let you read through it and answer it on your own. It has to do with different types of hazards that could have caused some years to be dry, wet, and whatnot. So I'll let you think about that. Okay, part number 3, proxy climate records in ice cores. Okay, so now we get into the ice core section. So in this section, we will look at some of the areas on Earth where scientists are drilling deep into ice caps to obtain important climate information from ice cores. This important climate information includes atmospheric concentration of gases such as carbon dioxide and methane that affect our global climate, or we think so. These gases are generally measured in parts per million, or ppm, or parts per billion, or ppb. So what does ppm actually mean? Just as percent means out of 100, so parts per million means out of a million. 1 ppm is equivalent to 1 milligram of something per liter of water, or 1 mg over L, or milligram of something per kilogram of soil, depending on what you're measuring. So that would be mg over kg. For this lab, you can assume that ppm is the same as parts per million by volume, which is ppmv. Okay? By measuring gases trapped in ice bubbles for long periods of time, we can understand how industrialization has affected carbon dioxide and other critical greenhouse gases. Use the image below, this one right here, and the link here to answer the following questions. So we can follow that link so you know what they're referring to. Okay, so you're going to see a set of information. So this particular figure has age in the x-axis. So this is years before present. So 0 is present. And here you have 200,000 years before present, 400,000 years before present, 600,000 years before present, and 800,000 years before present. This is from the Vostok ice core, which is from Antarctica, and it goes as far as 800,000 years before present. That's how much ice has been has recorded in the Antarctic ice sheet, and we can see from that CO2 amounts, and as a correlation unit we can use that CO2 to correlate with temperature measurements. So the y-axis has temperature changes from present, and that will be the light blue line, and then the CO2 is going to be the dark blue line. So you see that when CO2 increases, so does temperature. When it decreases, so does temperature. I should mention that we are still not necessarily sure if CO2 is what causes the temperature to rise or the other way around. That even though we assume that that's the way it is, that with higher CO2 we get higher temperatures, it could very well be the other way around. There's some argument in the scientific community over that. So right now here I'm just presenting you the data that we have thus far. Okay, so over the past 800,000 years, the low carbon dioxide values correspond to cold glacial periods. So these low areas also say temperature is low, and they correlate with glacial periods. What range are those low values? And what they mean by what range is what range of CO2. So you can think about that based on these values. What is the lowest value that you have? Again, based on these values on the y-axis on the right. Over the past 800,000 years, the high carbon dioxide values correspond to warm interglacial periods. What range are those high values, and what is the highest value? So same thing. Take these values that you have on the right of the y-axis and correlate with the peaks that you have and the possible high values. All right, question 17. What is the difference between the highest and lowest carbon dioxide levels over the past 800,000 years? So basically, tell me the difference between this and this. And what is the current global carbon dioxide level? So what is it that you are seeing? Not here, because this is too recent, or too far from recent, I should say. But look at the link. So this is the information that I gave you on that link, or where it brought you to. It's from NOAA. So basically, what is the CO2 currently? What are the levels of CO2 that are being measured right now? Okay. So what is the approximate difference between the current carbon dioxide level and the highest pre-industrial carbon dioxide level over the past 800,000 years? And I'll let you think about that again, just by looking at the highest peaks that you have within the graph, and by looking at the two graphs from the link that was added there in the PDF. Okay. Question 19. What has been the trend of atmospheric carbon dioxide levels since 1959? Has it been increasing, decreasing, fluctuating, or remaining the same? You do that based on the two graphs from the link that I attached, and I'm sure you can do that on your own. I won't show it to you. And then last, given that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, levels are continually increasing and remain in the atmosphere for a long time. What do you predict will happen to global climate over the next 50 years? Again, that is slightly speculative because it is what we are seeing today as scientists, is the best we can do thus far. As I said, there is a big push, or there's a correlation, let's just say, between temperature and CO2. However, we're not exactly sure that it is CO2 that is causing the temperature to rise dramatically. We believe that that's the way it is based on our understanding on greenhouse gases and what they do to the climate, the weather, well, the weather specifically and the climate on a larger scale. But that is not, that has not been proven without any fault, okay? So again, do your best on this last question, but take into consideration that that is not necessarily the only possible way that is, okay? All right. So with that, we are done with lab number 5. I hope this was helpful. If you need extra help, please don't hesitate to ask me any questions. Email me and I can help you with that, or we can schedule some meeting through Blackboard Collaborate Ultra and I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you have. Have a good week.